Hi, it's really great to be with you, and thank you all for coming along to this special event. When Christine invited me to interview her and host this event for the launch of her book Coco Island, I was blown away. I first came across Christine's writing when she was featured in Carcanet's New Poetry's 8. And as someone who lived for a year in Jamaica, one of the things that immediately enraptured me about Christine's poems is the way in which they bring alive her Jamaican childhood. Coco Island is set in the village of Negril, and it really is an extraordinarily sustained piece of writing. This is a detailed, multi-part collection written through nearly 115 pages, set in a village which brings the eyes almost of a reporter, but also the acute eye of a poet. When I first came across her poems, I wrote this: her poems transmute the stuff of a Jamaican childhood and heritage into language which both invites and quietly disturbs. She enables a person like me with only a passing encounter with Jamaica to participate in a world which exceeds my understanding. So would you please welcome Christine as she writes from her exceptional debut collection?
Okay, there we go. Finally got it. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me here tonight to listen to me read from my debut collection, Coco Island. Thank you, Rachel, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm glad that I'm actually talking to someone who've lived in Jamaica for the time that you've had, so that we could actually talk about some of my experience that you'll understand because you know that the island. Thank you. So the first poem I'm going to read tonight is Black Sheep. And Black Sheep is inspired by a period in my life when I was living with my dad, and a letter arrived from my mother, um, expressing her desire to see me, I think, after not seeing me for 12 years. So this is what happened after I received that letter. Dusk was near, but not nearby enough for you to miss your way onto our veranda. White dress and hair cut like a man's. You sat with your legs wide, squinting into the fading light. Two strangers we were, each one pretending to know the other. Mother, daughter, daughter, mother, yet unfamiliar. The black frock you brought was a funeral dress, puffing out at the ends with layers and layers of black webbing black with mesh netting to wrap me in, to haul me away in that giant black bag nesting at your restless heel. I look at you without thought, like I did and the last Sabbath day I saw you stumbling down that slippery slope. When my father stood with me at the front door, he said that I was the black sheep in your eyes. I can't say anything else. And no, and this veranda with the black night crawling in, all thought escapes me as I gaze into your blue eyes. Who are you? What were your excuse? What were your excuses then? Ends meet. You had left to make ends meet, and now you have returned holding the ends of a severed circle. You carried the empty bag to my bedroom in silence, ate quietly at my brother's table, and listened as I read from a pile of textbooks. The small double bed sinking under our weight as we slipped the thin cotton sheet over our feet. You never talked of those last years, or said why you had come, or why you had with you that empty bag. At daylight, when the rooster crowed thrice, I awake from my sleep, you were gone. A dead-ended telephone number fell off the pillow onto the floor. I perceived the scourge in me that had driven you away once more. Years after my father had died, I saw you again, but you had gotten smaller. Your blue eyes were even bluer, still and familiar. At dusk, I listened to you talk on the hotel balcony and waited quietly for something visceral to happen, for some pull to guide me. It was on that night when the light from the moon had flooded the mango tree that I saw a black shape sitting in your seat. Thank you. So the next poem I'm going to read as soon as it comes up is What Should I Call You? And this is also an echo of the poem I've just read. It's the daughter's sort of broken relationship with the mother, and it reflects that sort of early childhood sort of curiosity about this woman that used to visit and not really knowing how to address her. Let's have some water, sorry. What should I call you? I asked my father, what should I call you? He answered, call me Dada. I asked my grandmother, what should I call you? She answered, call me Granny. I asked my grandfather, what should I call you? He answered, call me Ma Sam. I wanted to ask my mother, what should I call you? But she had left to buy sweets and never came back. Years later, she returned holding a sweet baby boy. I asked my mother, what should I call him? She answered, call him Desmond. My mother asked my father if she could put Desmond to sleep on his bed. My father said, no. She sat in the doorway with Desmond sleeping on her lap. I asked my mother, what should I call you? She answered, don't wake the baby. After she left that evening with Desmond on her hip, I asked my father, what should I call my mother? He answered, call her whatever feels right. I asked my grandmother, what should I call my mother? She answered, call her whatever sounds natural. I asked my grandfather, what should I call my mother? He replied, ask her if you ever saw her again. It took 13 years before I saw my mother again. I asked my father, are you sure she's coming? He answered, that's what the letter said. When my mother arrived, she sat down in the doorway, gazing up at me. I asked my mother, what should I call you? She answered, no, what should I call you? Thank you. So the next poem is The House. And it's really hard to explain the inspiration behind this poem, except this poem is the thing I want the readers to get from it is that it's filled with light and hope. Although there is such darkness in it, there's hope for the future and hope for, people who've experienced human suffering. The house. It's the daylight darkness he remembers the most. The windowless rooms and the rays of grey beams fighting to float through the twisted stick walls. He could never find anything in that black house. But each time he thinks of the darkness, he sees his father pulling at the end of the galvanized chain, holding him to the wall. The chains were secured in the mornings. His metal mother chiding him with sharp clinging to stop him straying, and were removed at night while he watched for empathy. One morning, he searched the darkness and found the key to freedom. After work, his worn father caught him with the neighbor's kids. The key disappeared for good. Then it was just the darkness, the weight of metal scarfing his neck, and the solemn vows to himself of leaving once he was old enough to depart. Years later, as he watched his only son playing with the neighbor's children, he thought of his father, trying to understand his lasting cruelty. At times, he finds himself drawn to the darkness inside his scarred mind, and to resist, he paints giant windows on his walls to let the light in. So before I sort of read the next poem, I just want to quickly say that during World Book Day, I was invited to a school to read to a group of Year 10 students. And one of the students I've met there have since read this poem and apparently said he wants to have the two last lines tattooed onto his body as a way of, sort of reminding him that there's always light within whatever darkness there is. So the next poem is The Donkey Ride. And I have a confession to make. I can't really see the screen. So the poems that I'm not too confident about knowing from scratch, I'm going to put my glasses on, but once I do this, I won't be able to look up. Thank you. Donkey Ride. The lonely dirt lane that connected our house to the graveyard was the donkey's land. He owned it, an acre from the ackee trees to the first grey tombstone. It was his kingdom, his domain, where none but his master was allowed to go. He would come charging, curbed by his rope, whenever we passed him. Every midday, when he brayed loud in the shade of the ackee trees, we'd pull our plaits to make our hair grow as long as his breath, believing grandma's words. Donkey Ride was never far from our minds. His master would send us to the shops for cigarettes and once promised us a ride and the forward donkey. On returning, we called two lean boys to help us on the donkey's back and fell off 3 times, roaring with laughter when we kept sliding off his slick coat. We commandeered him from his sanctuary and took him beyond the hills for miles into the forest of mango trees, laughing and racing him. When the sun went west, it began to drizzle. We tried turning the donkey around, but he ran further into the woods, us slowly slipping free. The rain drummed conspiratorially on plucked leaves as we jumped from the furrowed mule, watching him vanish with the thunder encouraging him on. We ran from the branches, afraid of lightning strikes. Soaked to the bones, we returned home, one missing mule on our anxious minds. At dusk, the tears ran free. The next day, we met early, reciting our lines, lies to tell the owner of his donkey's plight. When we heard loud braying coming from the donkey's kingdom, running to the veranda, we saw him, head thrown back and mouth turned towards his master's house, with lips parted, trying to turn us in. Thank you. The next poem, Like Buffaloes. So this poem, I'll say something about it before I start reading. Start is a poem that speaks about an incident that I witnessed on a bridge when I was younger. And I sort of felt at the time that not much was known about epilepsy. And, hopefully that if this were to happen again in Negril, perhaps the community would sort of respond differently. Like buffaloes. That sweltering June day on the bridge, above the molasses waters of the Negril River, we saw him half naked and vulnerable. Passers-by had stopped to watch him convulse involuntarily towards the riverbank, while hazarding a guess to his ailment, spasming, rolling, frothing at the mouth, and moving closer to the water's pebbled edge. He had no control of his defeated limbs. We watched his body fall, rise, fall, thinking of 100 ways to help, but knowing we were too weak, too small to pull him back. The adults looked numbed, petrified, saying he might grab hold of them if they tried to stop him falling into the glassy marsh. Our uncle signaled it was time to go before the stranger rolled down the riverbank and plunged into the moving current. We walked away, trying not to look back, hearing our uncle's guttural voice explaining how quick it takes a human to drown. If only people were like buffaloes, it would take him hours before his lungs failed and enough time to get him help, he said. The stranger had vanished behind the crowd as we crossed the road to the market, hoping the murky waters would revive him. Thank you. So the next poem is Yes. And this was an experience that I've had in a school ground. So where I went to school in Negril, my school was a all-age school just across the road from the sea. And we kind of shared the school compound with a police station with only a wall separating our playground from the trail blocks. And during recess, we would climb onto the wall and look over into the station grounds. And, you know, I can't remember if we used to make fun of the prisoners, but I can remember that it was very amusing. And one day we went to look, and this is what happened. Yes. In our uniforms, blue dress and white blouse, we climbed the school wall under the poinciana tree. until we could see inside the station grounds. I wasn't sure what we were looking for. I had imagined we were going to tease the prisoners again, whose long, sorrowful faces stared out from behind the steel bars. Your black shoes bent at their narrow points as you gripped the wall. Even after my hands grew weak from clinging, you did not let go. Knees scraping against the exposed concrete, I rejoined you as our schoolmates played A Sailor Went to Sea, Sea, Sea. I followed your gaze to the see-through rooms and saw what had taken your attention, what had kept you from our games of handball and skipping rope. There, sitting on the mildew floor, was your mother, locked behind the irons of the cell, her blonde wig matted by her feet. Her black eyeliner had streaked her painted cheeks. An hour later, eating free bulgur for lunch, you emptied your plastic plate onto mine, got to your feet, and said, "What else is an unqualified woman in Negril to do?" We linked arms and passed the Stutch girls whose father owned hotels. They were drinking Pepsi and eating buns with cheese. I asked if you had always known about your mother, and you said yes. Thank you for listening.
Got there. Technology.
I know it's
That was wonderful, Christine. I want more. I was hoping for there'd be more poems. I do believe we have got a poem later on, haven't we? I think
yes, there's one more to go.
to
Yes,
to close with.
it felt really strange reading without seeing anybody. It's like, okay, can I go now? Like, can I just stop here? Can I go? There's no one listening.
Well, what I absolutely commend to you in due course is that you have a look at the comments, which are lovely, and it shows
Okay.
just how much attention has
Oh,
been given to your reading. And given the fact that you had to dig out your specs at one point, you know, I think that's sort of extra points to you
yeah.
for that. Look,
Yeah.
we've got plenty of time here to have a chat. But just to say to those who are here to listen to Christine, please, 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 can you add comments, but also questions? It is possible for you to use the question and answer uh, button, and you'll be able to put a question in there, and I will pick up those as we go through. But for now, Christine, let's have a chat.
Yes.
There are so many things that we could talk about, but I think a good and interesting place to start is about the role of parents and parent figures, fathers, mothers, in your poems. I mean, we absolutely heard that in Black Sheep, um, a conversation with your mum, your mother. I guess for those who know Jamaican culture, they it's normal, I guess, to sort of think about mothers, perhaps less about fathers. There is that idea in Jamaican popular culture of the baby father. The
Yeah.
baby father has lots of children and doesn't stick around. But what's really evident in your collection and your poems is father or father figures are consistent. Can you just tell us about your decisions around that and how that flows out of autobiography?
Yeah, it wasn't so much a decision to write about father figures. It came to be like that because I was writing about my own experiences, and obviously my dad was present. And I think whilst writing this as well and reading back, I realized that I was sort of raised predominantly by men. I
Mm,
realized that there were a lot of uncles and my brother, my dad, and there weren't that many women present in my life. There was just my grandmother and a few aunties, but the dominant presence were the male, the male figure. So when it came to writing this collection, it wasn't so much thinking, okay, I'm going to write about fathers. It just came to be that way because that's my lived experience. Yeah.
mm, mm. And but dare I uh, laser in on a line that absolutely leapt out at me. I think it's in Black Sheep, which where I think you this is a forensic poem. There's sort of forensic observation, and I think we'll talk a bit about the role of observation in your poetry in a bit. I may not have got this quite right, but what I heard was I perceive the scourge in me
Mm-hmm.
that had driven you away once more. Now
Yeah.
that seems, gosh, that's a powerful line. Could you tell us more about that,
Yeah.
or don't, or say,
Oh,
actually, no, I don't want to talk
yeah.
about
Do
that,
you
but
want
tell
me
us
to
more.
burst into tears or something?
No.
No, but yeah. I thought about that line many, many times, and I said to myself, what is it that I'm trying to say? Why did I say that? And yes, my dad would tell me that I was the black sheep in my mother's eyes, and I didn't understand what that meant. And so when she left, that's the line that came, that
Mm.
perhaps that's what it was.
I mean, it is an extraordinary line. And I mean, it's one of those things, I don't want to get into this quite so early, but let's go there.
Okay, go on.
Well, it's about how in the poems that you particularly read tonight, but again, of course, as a collection which reflects on a Negril childhood, I am fascinated by how you manage to speak in a way that feels authentic to that childhood, but
Mhm.
it's with the eyes of an adult,
Yeah,
but that respects the child.
yeah,
And a line like, that the scourge in me, that feels like an adult line, but it captures something about how children can judge
yeah,
themselves.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I feel when I think of my older self, my younger self, sorry, it's almost like it's someone else. I'm not looking at me sort of as I am now. It feels as though the younger person was actually someone else. So I could look at that younger self through an analytical eye, sort of observing that experience that they've had. And I tend to say that I feel as though I've lived so many different lives, like in so many different dimensions. And when I write about the younger Christine, it's
Mm,
it's like someone removed from me. There's this detachment there. Yeah.
mm,
And I've got a lot of, I often hear people on the radio talking about if they could write a letter to their younger self, what would they say?
mm,
And it's somehow perhaps these poems as sort of like letters to the younger self as well. So
mm.
I'm saying I've got you, you're okay.
That's
So
beautiful.
yeah,
That's really, gosh. I
yeah,
mean, but what a consistent series of letters. I mean, across, is it 9 sections? I forget, nine, or is it 9 or 10?
yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
I'm
13, lucky number.
13,
Yeah,
13 in total. I mean,
unlucky number.
gosh, I mean,
Unlucky number.
that's just extraordinary.
Yeah,
Um, the poem "The House," I,
yeah,
again, I is very moving when you talked about the the young man who wanted those final lines. Um, inscribed on his body. I mean, just inscribed
yeah,
in his
yeah,
soul almost.
maybe somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. his sleeve or something.
I mean, one of the things which I think you handle very brilliantly in that poem, because of course a house has got that structural integrity, of course, you know, that sort of sense of shape,
Yeah,
is the reality of violence that impacts any human society, but one which I think sometimes surprises people when we think about Jamaica.
yeah.
Um, I mean, you know, as a white middle class pretentious person, when I went there, a tropical paradise, and had no sort of sense of the, I mean, the actual real beauties there, the real wonders, but also some of the real violence. And
Mhm.
I, I just could you just say a little bit more about the way in which that poem, and maybe some of the other poems in the collection, which we haven't heard tonight, are sort of acts of resistance to violence, because that's what I see them, are acts of resistance to to our negative instincts.
Yeah, okay. Right, okay. Yeah. It's really hard to put that into words, acts of resistance to negative
Mm,
sort of negative ideas about Jamaica and the violence there. When I wrote The House, it was more of trying to find a way into a um, a trauma that I knew about,
mm,
and how can I be true to the sort of the say characters, for a better word, in the poem, is to sort of present it from a point of view where I'm not placing judgment on anything that I've seen. It's more reporting what I saw. And that's how I was able to write it from that point of view where it doesn't come across as though I'm trying to influence anything that happens
mm.
there. So how, yeah, I don't know how
No, but
to,
that's great. I mean,
yeah,
I think you captured. I mean, that I think that really addresses the question, because you know, one of the things that you've said to me in previous conversation is that as a poet, so much of what you're seeking to do is to report
yeah,
and
that's,
observe.
yeah,
I mean, and again, just tell us more about that. You know, how
yeah,
you are a poet of observation and reporting.
yeah. I think because Jamaica obviously is my home. It's where I was born and raised, you know, it's in me. When I think of home, I think of Jamaica. And despite what people might read about it, it's it's nothing like that.
Mm,
You know, it's like when you hear about stabbings in London, you might imagine what sort of people they are, what homes or backgrounds they're from, and thinking the entire London is like that. But it's not, it's not that for
not,
Jamaica. You know, there are people in Jamaica, obviously, of different levels. You know, you can go from very wealthy to very poor. And I was
mm,
fortunate to be sort of in the middle of all of that. So when I write about Jamaica, it's more being truthful to the people that I know there, some of which are whom are not no longer with us,
mm,
and be truthful to myself. I don't write with an agenda. I'm not trying to get people to like Jamaica or to like me or to like anything, or I'm not trying to get people to hate it. What I'm trying to do is to be true to the life I've had in Jamaica, and how do I sort of record that? That's what I'm interested in. There is this feeling in me whenever I sit down to write about Jamaica. It has to be, I kind of wait for that feeling to come, and it's where I'm very relaxed and mellow, and I know the voice that I want to come across, and I
mm.
wait for that. You know, and sometimes I don't, I sort of use things to get me into that mood, not drugs or anything like that, music. I put some reggae on, I listen to Burning Spear, Bob Marley, that sort of thing, just to get that feeling, you know, to take me back there so that I can be true to the life that I've had.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
But you're a great storyteller,
Yeah.
Christine. And again, and in some of the poems we haven't heard tonight, but you hear in some of the poems that you shared, you have a, a capacity to work with with forms and modes which create a sense of story. I mean, the donkey poem. I mean,
Yeah.
there is,
Yeah.
and it's funny, and the final stanza is just, I was laughing to myself when
Yeah.
you read it. Storytelling, but truth telling. Tell me a
Yeah.
bit more about how you might use story
Yeah.
to report and tell the truth.
There's a lot of scaffolding as well, which I use fiction to do. Definitely to get that in. I became obsessed with Les Murray when I was on my master's course, and I read his poetry, and I loved the ending of the way he would end a poem. And I made that my objective to try and end a really good line or really good verse. And so when I write, I know sometimes I can't say sort of a matter of fact, what happened here. So I'll use fiction just to sort of put flesh onto that, so it's sort of skeletal sort of structure of the poem, just to bring it to life and to make it live. And because my first love is fiction writing, novel writing. So I went to university just to do that. And I've ended up writing poetry, which I'm very grateful to John McCullough for, actually, for discovering the poet in me.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so when I do write, I use that sort of creative writing skill as well to, and I've always said I want it to be sort of like a moment, a complete moment,
Mm.
in that poem's life. And although sometimes it's stretched over years, like you've seen in Black Sheep, and
Yeah.
but sometimes I want it to feel as though you get a full scope of what's happening. You can walk away with a better understanding of that situation or what I'm trying to convey.
Great. Thank you. Well, are you happy to take one or two questions or comments
Yeah,
from?
if they're not too hard to answer.
No, no, well, look, Christine, you're brilliant, and just
Okay.
relax. It's
Yeah.
just relax. So,
Okay.
I mean, first, I'll take one slightly out of order here, but start with Marley Corns, who says, "Hi,
Oh,
Christine. I'd like to ask about the inspiration behind Auntie Lee."
oh gosh, Molly. That's not even, I've not read that tonight. I was going to say that's not even in the book, but it is. Yeah. Yeah. Auntie Lee. So yeah, the inspiration for that is growing up in a household where we've had an uncle that had mental health issues, and he would go off, at least once a month or something like that. And as a young child, I learned how to spot this and to just take myself away because he would become violent, physically violent,
Mm.
whacking with stuff. And it was also like a drama being played out because like in slow motion, you'll see a relative walking past, and then you see them turning around and running the other way with him chasing them with a rake or something.
Oh gosh.
So that happened often, at least a few times a year. And on one occasion, his mother got really upset, and that's what she did. And that's what inspired that poem.
Thank you. Now, and a question from Jasmine Walker. I don't know if
Who
relative.
could that be?
Um, so when did you decide you wanted to be a poet? I mean, you've talked a bit about being a
Yeah,
fiction writer. I mean, so just tell
yeah,
us a bit more about the emergence of you as a poet.
yeah. I think, I've been writing poetry ever since I could write. I would say that's something that I would always do. But wanting to be a poet wasn't something that I had in mind for myself anyway. I wanted to be a novelist. So it was when I was on my my BA honors when I started writing poetry, and I had a really good, I'll say good tutor that would say, "Oh, that's no good, that's not publishable," and that's like went on for 3 years. And just before I finished the course, I wrote one poem about Jamaica, and he said, "Ooh, now you're onto something. This is publishable." And I thought, what have I done in that poem that I've not been able to do in the others? I'm
Mm.
going to hold on to this. And then when I got to Manchester for my master's, I went to John and I said, "Oh, what can I do to avoid essay writing?" And he said, "Just write poetry." And I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't want to do that. But okay, I'll do it." And the rest is history.
That's a fair trade-off, actually, Christine, isn't it?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
poems or
Essays.
essays. Love it.
Yeah.
Right, we'll take another question. This is from Rebecca, and this Rebecca's question very much feeds into something that I wanted to talk about, and it's about place. So Rebecca asks, it says, the sense of place is viscerally embodied in these poems. What a terrific phrase. Viscerally embodied in these poems. How challenging has it been to write them while living so far from Negril?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
has the distance helped your creative process? And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the latter one. Yeah, definitely. The distance. I went to Jamaica in 2019 and I wasn't able to write when I was there.
Gosh.
It was surprising. I couldn't believe it. I don't know what it was, but I felt that I was writing all these words, like one of my friends said, "How do you know so many words?" and, and no one's going to read it. I thought to myself, yeah, it was strange.
Gosh,
So
what was it about? Was it just that, was there something, was it overwhelming? You know,
yeah, because when you're writing about a place and you're actually there, and it sort of breaks the spell, the magic somehow doesn't
mm,
feel as magical anymore because I'm sort of with the people I'm writing about, and I started to feel sorry that I was writing about them, and suppose the guilt, so some guilt start to interrupt that creative flow.
mm,
So it's always best to move away from a place for me anyway, so I can
mm,
write about it. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting thing about guilt because,
Yeah.
I mean, you can say if you wish who said it about your poems, but I mean, you did tell me that, perhaps the best review of your poems was and of the collection is that it has integrity. And
Yeah.
and
I let you
I
get.
and I think that does reflect, uh, for me, as someone who admittedly has not lived in Jamaica for a very, very long time, and
Mhm.
also for a very short period of time. But for me, part of the integrity is the way in which you don't create a cartoon version of
Mhm.
Jamaica, it is respectful, it's honest, and
Yeah.
but it shows a truth that is moving and human. And I just wonder if when you're there, when you went back, is it just too close? And but I don't think guilt should be the issue because there's integrity, don't you think?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. There is this thing that says, well, it's not really true because I'm not profiting, but profiting of others, that sort of thing. But yeah, I suppose that's part of it.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's something maybe I need to go away and think about. Yeah.
I mean, it is a challenge, I think, to all writers. Where do we get our source material from? And I mean, certainly when I wrote Eleanor Among the Saints, which is about someone who died 700 years ago, I still worried I was exploiting
Yeah.
that person. They've been dead 700 years.
Yeah.
So But
Yeah.
I don't see exploitation here. I see you bringing people alive, some of whom are no longer with us.
Yes.
And that's an extraordinary work of resurrection.
Yes. Yes. Mortality.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see another question. So Nancy Ann Miller says this:
Hmm.
I love the intimacy of your work. You take us directly into your childhood. Is a poem begun because of an emotion attached
Hmm.
to a past experience? Or is it just the vivid memory of an experience wherein you think, oh, there must be a poem there?
Wow. Thank you, Nancy. That's really good. Yeah, I think the answer is both. There's the memory and then that searching for the emotion, the angle to take it. That's how I write. See, I need to see that image or yeah, yeah. And then I search for the emotion and when that comes, then I'll know what to do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. So there's image and then finding the emotion. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
Wordsworth, I mean, I can never remember the exact quote, but, poetry is what sort of emotion recollected in tranquility. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's truth in that. But for me, it's all, when you were talking about writing about Negril and Jamaica, it's it's the distance that matters
Hmm.
as much as the tranquility, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yes.
And you almost
Yeah.
like a photojournalist, almost like a reporter, you take those images and you
Turn them
find,
into something. Yeah.
or am I getting it wrong? I mean, tell me,
No,
Christine.
no, you're not. You're guessing it right. Yes, I do take those images and turn them into poetry. But yeah.
Um, okay. Yeah, we've still got, gosh, we've got lots of questions, and I need to bear it, sorry, because I don't want to exhaust you.
No,
And we
I'm not.
need to make sure there's
Okay.
time for your closing poem as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so again, everyone has absolutely picked up on your capacity to transmute your childhood into something that's available for all of us. And Royston Tester says, do moments in your childhood stay with you for so long into adulthood that they
Mm,
almost demand you pay them attention? So let's
yeah.
that's a two-part question. So yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah. That's a good one as well. I've thought about this, the question to myself is, am I affected by my childhood?
Hmm.
And I would always say no, because it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to somehow creating a body of work, then I have to go back and lift that veil and to really ask myself, how good was it really? And am I willing to be truthful about my own experiences? And I felt I've been walking around when I came to live in England for the first time in 2003, I think it was. I remember someone describing the beaches over here. It said topless on a beach is when someone takes their scarf off. And that's how I feel. Like I'm taking my scarf off, talking about these images from my memories from my childhood. So, in answer to that, yes, somehow.
That's a fantastic image.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, the second question is, and when, if you do, and you do, does anything change about that memory as you inscribe it into a poem?
Yeah, I had a conversation with somebody at Manchester University when I was on my master's course, and he was explaining to me that each time you recall a memory, something changes about it. And I was adamant that it doesn't. But so I tend to think that my memory is very accurate, but who knows?
Well,
maybe, yeah,
stick with it, Christine, you know?
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I've got one of those. I mean, I'm terrible. I really struggle to remember lots of elements of my childhood. So I'm in a bit in awe of your
yeah,
recall. It's very impressive.
yeah. I think I've got a good memory.
Okay, gosh, there is just so many questions, and we might not have time for them all. I think it's only right and fair that we take one from John McAuliffe.
Yes.
So hi, Christy. Jamaican and Trinidadian poetry and Caribbean poetry more generally are in great shape, and they sure are. Could you
Mhm.
say something about your sense of Caribbean poetry here in the UK?
Now, John, you've asked me a hard question. Right. So I would say, yeah, it's what you were saying before, that question about being, what did you say it was? Being cartoonish about
Yeah,
the,
so yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, you mean,
yeah,
and you're not cartoonish, very
yeah.
far from it.
I do think a lot of what I've read are cartoonish. I don't know.
Gosh, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we don't ask you to
Yeah,
name names.
I
Yeah,
won't name any names, but I do feel I'm such a fierce critic of myself as well. That's why I get so nervous reading my own stuff. But yeah, that's how I feel. Paper thin.
Christine, you really shouldn't. You really
No,
shouldn't.
no, paper thin about some of the stuff I've read.
Oh, I see. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So despite maybe that sense of robustness in the scene, because I mean, gosh, I could name a whole bunch of people, but I'm scared to say
yeah,
any names now
yeah,
in case
yeah,
in case
yeah,
you sort of betray a flicker of
yeah.
um. But that's really interesting to hear you say that for you,
That's how I
there's a
feel.
paper thin,
Yeah,
cartoonish take. Gosh, I think that's a conversation for offline
yeah,
for us,
maybe.
Christine. We need to talk about this, and maybe John as well.
Yeah,
Have a
thanks,
coffee
John.
about that one. Okay. I think the final question, and yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to end here, but I must admit I had this same question. This is from Dimpner Edwin,
Mhm.
who asks about what happened to the man who had the fit. She says, "I'm haunted by this poem," and
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
am too, because I experienced something like that when I was in Jamaica. So tell us more. What
Don't
happened?
know. That's the answer. We were taken away by
But
our uncle.
but that line, if only people were like buffalo from your uncle, but then what is it? I can't even read my right. How hoping. Yeah, this is from you, I guess.
Yes, yes,
Hoping the murky waters would revive him.
yes.
I mean, that's kind of a religious vision, but also a child's vision of hope. That's extraordinary
Yeah,
line.
yeah. Because I don't know what happened to him, but you know, hopefully if he had gone in, he would go, oh, I'm in water. I'll get up.
But what you do, which it's so well, Christine, is you take a line like hoping the murky waters would revive him, which is true, but
Hmm.
it's full of that metaphorical religious resonance.
Yeah.
So thank you. Time has almost caught us. It's been an absolute privilege for me and a
Oh,
joy,
thank you. And for
Christine.
myself as well. Thank you for agreeing to host this for me as well.
Well, well, just to say, folks, please, 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 please buy Coco Island by Christine Rosita Walker. Christine is going to close the evening with a poem. And then I think Jazz will come back on just to say a bit more about purchasing a discounted copy. So, Christine, over to you.
Thank you. Right, so this final poem has a haunting quality to it, and it has to do with a dream I've had when I was younger, about someone in the family dying, and the next day we did receive a letter, I think it was a telegram that this person had passed away. And this is what happened afterwards, a few months later. The swivel chair. The old lady had once had a daughter who died in New York. Her body was shipped home and buried under a jackfruit tree. Her apartment stripped and the swivel chair sent across the Caribbean Sea. The chair arrived on a Friday in a large brown box. The old lady loved the chair because it showed the life her daughter had. She placed the chair on the veranda next to her wicker bench. All summer, the chair and its metal column turned and turned and turned. The old lady feared the chair would cease to be a swivel chair if the turning did not stop. In the heat of the sun, the chair turned and turned and turned. Its molasses-colored oil seeped up from its base as the chair turned and turned. The neighbors who came to the old lady's house watched the chair turn right round, then left and right round again. The old lady was kind, and the local children enjoyed sitting on her veranda, eating mangoes and singing ring game songs. The children also liked spinning on the foreign chair. Never had they seen a chair that goes round and round like a merry-go-round. The old lady knew that the chair would not last if the turning did not stop, and would ask the children not to spin as much. But the children would not listen. Each day, they'd come to the old lady's veranda and whirl on the swivel chair, laughing, whooping, and singing. They did not know what the chair meant. The old lady did not tell them that the chair had belonged to her only daughter. Instead, she would ask them not to spin as much, but the swivel chair turned and turned until one day the old lady's soft voice faltered. She did not ask the children to stop as she had done before. She watched them turn and turn the memory of her child into creeks and oil. On each day, the children came and sat down in pairs, singing, dirty bus, round and round, donkey want water, wash him down. As the sun was setting behind the sea, the chair began to squeak and squeak as if the voice of her dead daughter, was calling from within the leather seat. The children heard the squeak, but kept on spinning and spinning and spinning. The old lady watched in silence as the metal column grew longer and longer. It rose up until she could see its metal tip sharp. The chair tumbled to the floor. The children were still clinging on when it crashed to the ground. They squealed and laughed and giggled. The children tried to push the column back inside the base, but could not. They drifted off, leaving the chair in halves. The old lady watched the children go one by one. She looked at the broken chair and thought of her daughter's voice and the children's song, and felt something swells inside her heart. She called her son to take the base and the seat to the back room and lock them in with the bed foot and the frame of her daughter's things. Whenever the old lady passed by the door, she could hear the children's song haunting the room. At night, when she could not sleep, she would hear her daughter's voice singing in a foreign accent. Dirty bus, round and round, donkey wants water, wash him down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. And congratulations. Yeah, it was so great to hear you read those poems. Like, yeah, I just thank you so much. And thank you, Rachel, as well. It was great to have you hosting this evening. And really appreciated you leading the conversation and reading everyone's questions out. And yeah, thank you guys for all your questions. Like, there was so many. There's still so many in the Q&A box. It's really cool when you all get involved like that. So thank you. You should be able to see that I've put the link in the chat for you and the discount code. If you can't see that, then just check your emails tomorrow. There'll be an automatic email from Zoom and it'll have all of the information there so you can buy a copy of the book. But just send me an email if you have any problems getting hold of one or getting the discount code or anything like that. So the last thing for me to tell you is about our next online launch, which is going to be for Sasha Dugdale's new collection, The Strong Box. That is on the 1st of June, and it's slightly different than our normal launches. It's just going to be, it'll be in person in London, which you can pay to attend at the London Buddhist Centre, or you can watch it at home on the live stream, which will be free to watch, and you can do that via the London Buddhist Centre's YouTube channel, but the information is there in the chat and on the website, etc., etc. So that's it. I will leave the chat open for your like final messages for now, but yeah, well done again, Christine, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you to everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you.